Well, good evening to you, 2025. Professor Jen here, having some more coffee table thoughts, conversations with you. We'll always love to thank all of the persons who help us with captioning, even if I didn't thank you, if I forgot, because I was excited to get right in. Please forgive me. We always appreciate everything you do for us. We really do depend so much on all this technology, all this skill set to bring all of our worlds together at the same time in the same place so we don't have to exclude people and we can all be, equal when it comes to communication and the delivery of communication and receiving. So thank you again. If I failed to thank you before the last one or two, please accept my apology and know that I'm always very thankful. Tonight, I want to talk about some topics in literature, film, contemporary drama, where we don't really have a history in literature. I've been thinking about this for quite some time, that really addresses the father as primary caregiver, the father as father and mother, or in many other cases in contemporary family science today, the father is variety of roles by himself. I was thinking to myself, really, uh, there aren't many examples really in literature, even from other countries, that address fatherhood as primary parenthood, primary caregiving. And I'll tell you what got me thinking about this because, I was digging around my fairy tales. Of course, we talked about Hansel and Gretel, and the father, at the very end receives the children back because the wicked stepmother died of the plague and the kids were able to come back. But we really don't think too much about uh, the father as the primary person. And so I was thinking about a couple things I wanted to share with you. I'll tell you what they are. 1979, award-winning film that was picked out of a fictional piece called Kramer versus Kramer. That's Kramer versus Kramer, 1979. I'll talk about that. I will be talking about a TV show that ran for about 3 seasons. The name of the TV show, your grandparents might remember it, Courtship of Eddie's Father. That was 1960s, 1969 to be exact. And then, of course, I was thinking also about another piece that you might remember, your parents would remember, Love Comes Softly. It was a Western romance. It came out in 2003. And then finally, a film that's around the same period of time called City by the Sea 2002. So I'm going to discuss Kramer versus Kramer, The Courtship of Eddie's Father, Love Comes Softly, and City by the Sea. I'm going to do this to make my point, use these four examples. And when you have time on your hands, if you're bored, if there's a snowstorm, if you're able to get the Netflix, do other streaming services, you can see all of these examples, I'm sure, for really no cost or a very low cost. If you really want to do something as it relates to this subject matter, look at something further. You see, I have a beautiful picture of a random father and what I assume is a baby boy, I don't know, an infant, and the whole idea of this parental bonding between father, caregiver, masculine representative, caregiver, and child. So unusual to see in literature. So we say, why, right? Well, here's some thoughts. Remember, I'm not right, I'm not wrong, I'm just making some observations. We don't think often in many cultures as the father is the primary caregiver because why? Because it doesn't seem like the natural place to look first. The woman carries the pregnancy for the 9 months because she becomes really the incubator for this person. She has all of the feeling of this person, delivers the person, uh, really takes the whole, and I don't want to say burden in a negative way. Please don't think of it that way, but takes on this whole burden of the birthing, the afterbirth, all of the nutrition, all of the not using any drugs, not smoking, no drinking alcohol, all of this kind of oversight, this very necessary monitoring of food and intake and exercise and all the right things. And of course, when the baby comes to life, outside the womb, the baby, if the baby's breastfed, really can't come out of the dad anatomically because there is no breast milk. There's nipple, there's tissue, but just not going to produce milk. Whereas the mother produces the milk, you get where I'm going with this. We just have this idea, whether it's right or wrong, that there's just this automatic intimacy between a baby and the mother because of all of this physicality. Then, of course, the Judeo-Christian, Muslim, Buddhist concepts suggest that the mother is, the nurturer, the caretaker, the hunter-gatherer, the person who spends a predominant amount of time with the children, especially when they're younger, the caretaking roles. And so many countries rely on that framework, that model, that the mother is the person who is doing all of these, I don't want to say soft skills, but all of the padding of the nest, that the father, in conventional terms, or we could say other partner, but for this discussion, it will be the male role, that focus, provides the means to get the nest, the means to get the food, and that's his role. So it's very unusual in literature because I've been looking, and in film, whether it's television, film production, etc., nationally and internationally, to find many films from even way back that address the whole idea that the father is in charge. The father is in charge for a variety of reasons, either death of the mother, abandonment of the mother checks out, the mother has a drug problem, the mother has an emotional problem, mental health issue, a physical issue, or wakes up one day and says, I don't want to do this anymore. 1970s, 1980s, we really never heard of the stay-at-home dad. It really became a movement, certainly in the 1990s, during a period of time, especially in television, the United States, where we had one of the very first shows on television that addressed single parenthood. At the time, I believe it was George Bush that was the president, and even he had commented on, he was it really providing an opinion that he felt it was disgraceful that in television we had a character who was willfully having a baby on her own without a male. So here we weren't really even embracing the idea of a male, a stay-at-home father, a male who really is the mother and the father for a variety of reasons, who becomes all roles, the nurturer, the person who goes out and does the hunting and gathering, the killing, whatever it takes. I'm speaking in terms of you know antiquated days where we didn't go hunting for food at Wegmans, we didn't go hunting for food at Dollar Tree, we didn't go hunting for food at Aldi's. The days when we really had all of these activities that we had to go out to bring the kill home, and we did it, in very, very, what could we say, farm to table manner, right? We didn't have all of this packaging. So I look at these places, we look at Courtship of Eddie's Father. Here it was 1960s, a television series. We'd never really seen anything like it before, that it was just a father and son. They really never discussed, I guess it was taboo. They never really discussed where was the mother, what happened to her, why isn't she around? And in the television series, it becomes very evident very quickly that Eddie's father clearly can't do it on his own and has to hire a butler in the house, which you and I might agree functions sort of as a maid, cooking, cleaning, taking the kid to school, taking the kid here, there, working out issues, dynamics with relationships that the kid has in grade school. But it's very clear that the father is trying to do everything, but he has all these limitations because he's trying to hold a career. Here today we compare that show to the contemporary view. There are plenty of single mothers that work, have numerous children, and they go to work, they go home, they do all kinds of things, and they certainly don't have staff they can hire. Perhaps they can't afford staff to hire. They don't have that kind of butler, maid person at home. They do it all themselves. So here, way back, we had this notion that if a man has to do it, he's certainly going to need assistance. If a woman has to do it, tough shit to her, she's going to have to do it on her own. Just sort of interesting how in cinema and media, we had really this double standard. So, right up there with why do we keep telling the same stories? Why do we keep referring to things we've seen in the past? Because we have to wonder to ourselves, is that still what happens? Think about it. Is that still what happens? Certainly, I look at other places in media, in film, in books, novels, fiction, etc., plays. 1979, Kramer versus Kramer. It was a blockbuster. Nobody ever broached this subject before. I'll do it for you. It's about two people who at one time were in love. They talk about their courtship they met in college. You can certainly relate. You meet people all the time. And they met and they had this whirlwind romance. My God, the sex was great. They couldn't live without each other. And here they're fast tracking it. They get this great careers going. They get this wonderful apartment in Manhattan. It all looks wonderful. We're talking 1979. We're talking about the period of time before the great 1980s of excess, where people had plenty of all kinds of things. The word minimalism really didn't exist. The word maximal living, maximalist was the key word. And here Joanna Kramer tells the husband, like before he's going to work, this is how the film opens. She says, I can't do this anymore and I'm not going to. And he first he can't believe this. The whole audience, I remember seeing it at the time I was about 16 years old, whole audience gasped. They're like, what? We'd never seen anything like this before. We'd never even read anything like this before. That a mother would want to abandon the kid and the husband. And she says, here's the credit cards. I just can't do it. It's not for me. And she walks out. The whole film then becomes how he's trying to hire an attorney to prepare his defense that he should have full custody. And here he's demonstrating he can hold a career, he can be the mother and the father. He's trying to reshape how he sees himself as a person who's been abandoned by his spouse in addition to being a parent. uh, how is he going to date? Asking all these questions. What woman is going to want him now that he's single with some other woman's child? These are still questions in 2025. A lot of men ask themselves, how easy is it for them to find another suitor, whether it's another man or a woman, when they have children by somebody else? These are what we would call today contemporary questions, but back even 30, 40, 50 years ago, this was so unusual, so anti-culture, counterculture. We never heard of such things before. Let me move up the line here. In 2002, we had another film, City by the Sea. You might like it. I think it's on Netflix or Peacock or something. And City by the Sea, there's this one part where the mother says, I just can't take care of this kid. He's lovely. He's all these things. He's dynamic. He's a lovely boy. I'm in love with him. I think all these things of him. I would do anything for him, but I just can't do it anymore. And she packs this child up about halfway in the movie, the film, and drives him up to the grandfather's house and plops him there and abandons him. The grandfather calls the mother up, the daughter-in-law, and says, "Look, you're having a bad day. Let me pay for your apartment. Let me help you with bills. I insist, let me be around." She's like, "Oh, I'm checking out. This isn't for me." So even 2002, we didn't know quite what to do with her either, because even in 2002, which is really 23 years ago, quarter of a century or so ago, we still didn't embrace the concept that women, especially through literature, in stories, took a hike. We just, I'm sure it happened, but we just didn't discuss it. 2003, we had another piece called Love Comes Softly. It was a film, did quite well. It was about the Western time, Western drama, where this young gal, who's not much older than most of you, winds up a very young widow. Her husband had some accident out in the wilderness, and she has nowhere to go. And the accident happened, I'm just, summarizing. uh, uh, the accident happened, say, on a Monday, and by Wednesday, she's married off to another man in the town with her consent because she has nowhere to go. There's no fax machine, no credit cards, no, we're talking about, the 1800s as a storyline. And she's married off to this fellow because his wife had died very suddenly and left him with a little girl who's 9 years old. So somebody in the town decides that these two people would be a perfect pair because she has no man to protect her. She has no way to get home. She has no money, no man to oversee her agency, her independence, to direct her, etc. Whether we like the language I'm using or not, we're talking 1850s is the setting. Women really weren't their own people. They were the property of a husband and or a father. And if those two people didn't exist, they were the property of a brother or the property of an uncle. There was some oversight. Just to give you a little background, it always amazed me, even as a young kid, 1972, 1973, somewhere around there, it was the very first time in the United States that a woman could get a credit card without a husband. Isn't that something? Let me repeat that. A woman could get a credit card without a husband. A woman could be a business owner. This started really in 1950s, 1960s, that a woman could buy her own home, her own condominium. A woman could get credit to buy her own vehicle. Didn't need her father's signature, even after she was a grown woman, that didn't need the permission of a husband. The only thing I think is strange today, 2025, is that, and I don't know about other states, but in New York, a man can get a vasectomy without his wife's permission. If a woman wants to get her tubes tied and she's married, she has to have her husband's permission. And that's something so interesting that we still have these little obscurities that hang around in culture. Anyhow, so again, we're not used to seeing abandonment by a mother figure. It just doesn't seem natural. And here I gave you these four examples of where it seemed very unnatural. How does it end in Kramer versus Kramer? The judge wants to give Joanna Kramer, who abandoned the kid, abandoned the husband, still wants to give her custody in 1979 in the storyline because this is what people did. They said the caretaking of children really is relegated to the mother. And no matter what she did, we're going to have to forgive her, including the statements, "I don't want to do this anymore," because that's the job of a woman. It's not the job of a man. The very end of the film, even Joanna turns around and says to her husband that she abandoned. She said, "I don't care what the court says." The judge says, "Let's go back because our son really belongs with you." I mean, this was a cliffhanger. 1979, nobody could believe that a mother would surrender her child to the husband and or ex-husband, that this was just an impossible function, this impossible to conceive this. The notion that this would happen just seemed unbelievable. It might as well have been a science fiction. But today, 2025, we see all kinds of different people that say the custody belongs here, that the person who's an excellent caretaker, we shouldn't be looking at anatomy and physiology. We should be looking far beyond that. So I look at shows today when I look through this lens and I say, how often do we see these configurations? Why is it important that we look at different generations to see how it is that these subjects, which are so near and dear to so many of our hearts and lives, look at the series Friends. I wasn't going to mention this, but as we're talking, or I should say, as I'm speaking and sharing with you, I'm thinking about Friends. It was one of the first shows 1990s where we had two people that weren't married that had shared custody of the child that they coupled together. So, here we are today. I think to myself, it's so much easier today for us to have these non-traditional discussions. But isn't it amazing that we look at literature from hundreds of years ago, in order for the man to have had this kind of custodial situation, it had to be because it was dire. Again, like I started this discussion, I'll end it. It had to be because the mother was non-functioning, or she just was deceased, or there was some out of this world reason that we had to have in order to accept the fact that being the principal caretaker isn't always the mother. It can be a variety of other persons. So I just wanted to share that with you as we keep asking why literature, why retell these stories, why examine how things were handled before, and if they were handled, what were the circumstances? You know, what excuses did we have to make in order to accept something? How much easier it is today to be able to accept things as is without having to have all of this verbiage and explanation and apologies. We've grown so much, and we see it through literature, film, music, etc., the arts, the humanities, fine arts. And so I thank you again for your time. It's always such a pleasure to be here with you to speak about these topics. There was a time in many colleges, very conservative colleges, 1950s, 60s, we could never have had these discussions. 1970s, 80s, and some other uh, environments, we could never have had these discussions. I really think we've come such a long way in being able to have constructive conversation about things that are real and things that are truly happening, rather than having to tippy toe and call things names that don't exist, or make up reasons why something is and not really discuss it. So you have a blessed evening, and always be well.